I think I need to throw up now.
Ooh, that was...
Oh, no.
That was a test. That was a test. Okay.
Test.
You're listening to the Legion of Reason.
Okay, well, this is what, episode 190 or 191, depending on which way you want to do it, because we recorded earlier this morning with Edza Ernst, and I'm not sure which one's going out first. But tonight we have with us Phil Ferguson, atheist financial planner and fellow podcaster. Hello, Phil. How's it going?
Fantastic. How you doing?
Awesome. You're going to hear some laundry in the background. This doubles as a studio sometimes, but Sunday is our laundry day, and this is a little earlier than usual. I've got my drink, and you know what? I forgot to start the other recorder. Let's get that going. Okay, so I got the second recorder. So, Phil, you're a financial planner and an atheist on your podcast, which is kind of an eclectic mixture, wouldn't you say? So it's definitely unique.
Absolutely. I was told when I proposed this idea to a few friends that one could not do a show that's 1/3 finance and 2/3 atheism. And my response was, I will do whatever the fuck I want.
well, especially when it's like In God We Trust is on the money.
Well, that's right. It comes. Part of it comes from years ago. I lived in this place called Arkansas, and I saw financial advisors that did Bible-based investing.
Oh, you're kidding me? Oh, you have to talk about that.
And they actually have Bible-based plumbers too. So
how does that
plumbers?
work?
Did you say?
Yeah,
Plumbers?
yeah.
What are the results of Bible-based financial planning?
Well,
I want to know about the plumbing. I mean, geez,
too. I'm hoping that the
you've
results
got
of
water
that is
all
no
over the
flood.
floor, right? I mean, come on.
Noah's flood. Come
Yeah,
on.
Noah's flood. You part the waters. You part the water.
Well, it's anything
Turn
else
them
like
into wine. I want a toilet full of wine.
Oh, jeez.
it's Christianity. So they pick what they want. So they say buy low and sell high, and then they find a Bible verse that when you squint and tilt your head 15 degrees, it says what you thought it did.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
you could have a Bible-based advisor that is really good, and they just pick some Bible verses to back up their philosophies, or you could have one that's a total thief and a scammer, and they pick Bible verses to back up those philosophies. So
I can imagine.
I'm blown away. We think up here that we call this actually Arkansas North, Alberta.
Well, or Texas.
Sort of.
Is it the same? Because we have the oil, right?
Yeah, we have
you
the
may
oil.
have the oil, but I don't think you have the religion.
Oh, heck yeah, we do.
We do. Calgary and
In the
Edmonton, not so
outlying
much.
areas.
Where I live, yes.
Yeah, Red Deer.
I'm in the Bible Belt of Alberta. That'd be more rural.
Yeah, Red Deer's kind of the buckle of the Bible Belt here.
They all vote Wild Rose, which might as well be the Democrat or the Republicans.
And do they have families that pump out 20 kids at a time, though?
Oh, heck, yeah. And they die of vaccine-preventable diseases. In fact, we just had one that go to court. The owners of True Art, their child died of meningitis, bacterial meningitis.
That's not fun.
They're Mormons. They're Mormons, though. Anyway, continue on, Phil.
No, I'm good. We'll go with the flow. But I did notice that, and of course you have people like Dave Ramsey, who's a very famous financial advisor, at least in the States, and he wraps it up in religion, and he puts on conferences and events for good Christian folk to come to and sign up for his course for $29.95 or whatever it is, and then they buy this material, and he makes some money, and then he'll refer you to an advisor that's a good Christian, and then he gets a cut of that too. So it's a beautiful system, and it's part of where I came up with the idea of calling what I do science-based investing or investing skeptically. Those are the two phrases I like to use.
How about evidence-based?
Evidence-based, and it's one of those things that we use it in medicine, or at least most people do. Probably you and the listeners of your show use it in many parts of their life, but why not with money? So the big questions that I ask is, what makes money? What makes money most efficiently? What makes money without getting too much risk? How does one make money? And one of the things I talk about is I teach people how to money.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 3 parts in how to money, and the first and the third are very easy. The first one is one must spend less than one makes.
Mm-hmm.
It's real easy to say, and I tell people all the time, I've spent my entire life trying desperately to follow my own fucking advice. It's easy to say, but then you have the opportunity to go to Italy for 3 weeks. What are you supposed to do? I mean, you've got to make choices. That's right.
But you still have a bit in savings for investing.
That's right. And the second part, of course, is investing. So you've got to save money, then you've got to invest. And that's the part that gets complicated. And the third part is time. It takes a lot of time to save and invest and end up with a portfolio unless you're really lucky and your name is Donald Trump and someone gives you $50 million to try buying a building. But
yeah.
It's that time element that a lot of people don't appreciate. And the way I explain it to people is most people have known somebody that's always trying to strike it rich. But did you notice they're always trying?
Yeah, they're always broke.
Yeah, it just doesn't generally work that way. Sure, some people have done something stupid and ended up making a lot of money. But for most people, when you do something stupid, you end up losing your money. That's how it works. So it is kind of like I'm the tortoise in the hare fable. It's about saving money, investing, time. And then if you follow the science, if you follow the data, you will become wealthy.
So this is kind of a Warren Buffett style of investing.
Well, in a lot of ways, you're right, and I'm very, very flattered that you even make that connection. But
we all want to be Warren Buffett.
It's one of those things that, in the show and when I give talks at conferences, the information is all free, and it's a weird thing. People are like, "Why do you tell people how to do it? Because don't you want them to hire you?" I have learned over 21 years of doing this that when I give a talk to 200 or 300 people in a room, and I will lay out exactly how one should invest. What are the best ways to do it? What are things to avoid? What are things to do? When it's over, people will come up and talk to me and say, "Can I hire you?" And part of my brain is like, I just told you what to do. And they say, "That's cool and all. I don't want to do it."
What?
And well, it's one of the things, as humans, we all have different things that we want to do and don't want to do. And a friend of mine helped me understand this almost 20 years ago when I started my business. I kind of thought, why do people pay me at all? Why would anyone hire me? Why wouldn't they do everything that I'm doing? Because to me, it seems easy. He was helping repair my car. And he says, "Phil, well, why don't you fix your own car? Why are you paying me to do it?" And that's why I don't have the tools. And he says, "You could buy the tools, right?" And I go, "Well, yeah, but I don't have a space." And he goes, "I'll lend you my garage and you can bring your tools over in your car over here and you can fix your own car." And I go, "Dude, I don't want to fucking fix my car." And he goes, "That's exactly it. Some people don't want to fix their car. Some people don't want to change their own goddamn oil. Other people love it. Fine. I pay people that like doing that job because they're fast and efficient and I get better results than me fucking around ruining my car. And I do something where I make money. And for other people, they'll fix electricity and plumbing and put in floors in their house. They have skills that I could only dream of having, but they don't want to deal with money and investments. So they pay me to do that part, and they can do something more productive and something that makes them money on their side."
Wasn't part of your advice to get a good financial planner and to recognize a good one from a bad one? Or
Well, one of the important things, the first piece, and you're absolutely right, of course, is that you can do it on your own. But if you don't want to do it on your own, you should get an advisor, and you want to find one, and I think this would apply north of the border, but you want to find an advisor that is a fiduciary. And I don't know the laws in Canada, but in many other countries in the world, a financial advisor has to put your interests first.
yeah, I worked for one that didn't. Have you ever heard of Portis funds? You should look them up. It was Ponzi scheme, and the lady I worked for, they buttered her up. She was the type that if you buttered her up, she would follow that over her over anyone else's interests. And basically, she fell for those guys, and dealing with the aftermath of everybody losing their money, having their funds frozen.
Yeah, I mean, there's an endless ways of ripping people off. But if in the United States and probably in Canada, you want to find someone who is a fiduciary, and that means they have to basically behave in a way like an attorney, or dare I make this analogy, a priest might, where they're supposed to do what they think, and they can be wrong, and so can I, and it's happened. But they're supposed to do what they think is in your best interest. They can't. For example, you could go see an advisor that might sell you an annuity, and if you have $100,000 to invest, that advisor could recommend something that pays them a 3% commission, a 5% commission, an 8, 11, 12, or even 15% commission.
Right.
Which one do they pick for you?
If they don't go with someone with history, like this Portis fund was rather new, and well, probably promised her 20% or something ridiculous.
Yeah, there's always new ideas. As a matter of fact, one of the things that someone just asked me to do, and I haven't yet done it on my show, so your listeners are going to hear something before my listeners.
Oh, dear.
Someone called me about socially conscious bonds. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that somebody wants to do something that will make lives better for hundreds or maybe thousands of people. And so it's a group's financing, a ground roots based money raising. And if this thing achieves its goal, there is a really rich person that says, I'll kick in $1 million at the end. So all the people that invested might make 10, 15, or 20% of their money extra and do something good for society. And people that listen to my show, people that tend to be a little liberal, look at this and they go, that's a great way to invest. I can make money and do good at the same time. And I like the sound of it, but it's new and it scares the shit out of me.
Exactly.
And I tell people, only invest in things that you understand. And I don't yet understand how this actually makes money. So until I do, I would never put a dime in it. But because once this thing gets running, I can understand the bonus money, but how do I get my money back? And if 6 months later I decide I don't want my money invested, and I've got the air quotes up, invested in this thing anymore, who do I sell my shares to? And if this thing fails, could I lose all of my money? Well, how is it like a bond? It's not really a bond, even though it's called a bond. It's not a stock because I don't really own interest in it. Yeah, and it's not liquid. So it's a whole new type of investment that I, with 21 years of experience, do not understand. So
That's
I'm not going to put money in it. But
Thank you.
people get very excited and they go, oh, this is a new way to make money. Well,
Yeah. So
maybe
so
it's a Ponzi scheme.
maybe.
So you're not interested at all in the, say, technical analysis people or the day traders?
Well, I'm interested in the fact that it gives me a good laugh. I have now lost track of the number of people that have made a fortune day trading until they didn't. And it's, there's always the exception. There's always the person that actually is good at it. A lot of times people basically end up what I would call, they end up buying their job. So they've saved and invested for decades, generation or two, and they've made good money. And now they've got 300,000, 800,000, or even $1 million, and they start becoming a day trader. Well, if you're a day trader with $1 million and at the end of the year you make $100,000, well, you made 10%. In an average year, the market makes 10%.
Yeah.
So you're making no extra money. You've bought your job. And even if you do make more, say you make 150 instead of 100, could you have done something else with your time to make 50,000 instead of the extra 50,000 in your investments? But I have known people that have made money for month after month or year after year until all of a sudden something changes and overnight they lose $200,000 or $300,000. Or if they're a real day trader, over day because they don't own anything overnight. They lose $200,000 or $300,000 in one day because a whole bunch of their bets, which is what this is, betting goes against them, and they all of a sudden they go, I got to stop, and they've got to go back to work because they can't afford to be a day trader anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I had a question about the thing you were just talking about. What did you call it again? Where you invest in
so
the
many
ethical.
Oh, the bonds?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
bonds.
So I'm wondering, because I'm sure I've heard of like ethical investing, right?
Yeah.
And so would that be something like where people would essentially manage your money in such a way that you're investing in companies that you know are treating their staff ethically and all that kind of stuff? Is that maybe the model that he's looking at? Because that's been done. Right?
I love the question. So what I was talking about was specifically called social impact bonds, and I don't yet fully understand them. But what you're talking about is often called socially responsible investing or socially conscious mutual funds.
Okay.
And so there are about, I think, 50, 60, 70 different mutual funds that will invest in stocks that meet certain criteria.
Okay.
The funny thing is that every single mutual fund that's a socially responsible mutual fund has different criteria. As an example, one company might choose to never invest in Apple stock because Apple hires children in third world countries to do labor. Mm-hmm. However, another mutual fund may choose to buy Apple stock because they provide employment opportunities for children in third world countries.
Wow, framing.
Right. So which one is better? I mean, from us in a first world country that have reasonable income and security and safety, is it better for a 10-year-old to have a job or not have a job? I don't know.
Depends on if they can go to school and have food too.
Right. So it's hard for us to judge from the outside. So they have to make choices. And some will not buy stock in companies that deal with tobacco, alcohol, firearms, military weapons, and all of these things. And these are great ideas, but there's a lot of problems. The first one is that all of the mutual funds have different rules. So if you want one that does what you want, you've got to read the prospectus on dozens and dozens of mutual funds until you find the one that matches your goals. Fine. The next thing that's a problem is virtually all of these mutual funds have some kind of clause in their prospectus that says, if we find an investment opportunity that we think is in the best interest of the fund, but it doesn't meet our rules, we reserve the right to still buy it anyway. So they've got all these rules that they don't have to follow. The next thing is that socially conscious mutual funds tend to, just like all mutual funds, underperform the market. So you're making less money year after year after year. You're making less money than you could. And the fourth thing, which is the real killer, you're not actually making a fucking difference. This is mental masturbation. The idea, for example, RJR Reynolds, world's biggest tobacco company, I think they're the world's biggest. If you don't want to support smoking, you don't buy stock from that company. Whoop-de-fucking-do. You don't buy stock in this multi-hundred-billion-dollar company. Somebody else does. And the funny thing, if you do buy stock in that company, you're not giving your money to the company. You're giving money to somebody else who already owns the shares. You're not helping or hurting the company by buying or not buying the stock. Now, the good skeptic will tell me, but Phil, if enough people don't buy that stock, supply and demand will take effect and the stock price will go down. Well, what is RJR Reynolds supposed to do? Tomorrow stop making cigarettes? It's never going to happen. The other thing is that if that actually happened, and I'm not even thinking it's possible, but if it did, if a large enough percentage of the population decided to not buy stock in a specific company, and that caused the price point of the stock to go down, that would only work until someone figured out that the stock had now gone down below a point where the stock was cheaper than the underlying assets of the company. And people who don't give a shit about your pie in the sky philosophy of not smoking will buy the stock run the price right back up, you will lose money, and the person who is going contrary to you will make money.
Yeah. So you're enabling those unethical people to make even more money.
That's right. So what I tell people when I talk about this in a talk is the first time I brought this up, I thought the crowd was going to revolt on me because I think about a third of the people had money, at least some of it, in the socially responsible funds. And I'm up on stage telling them it's a bad idea. People don't like to be told they did something that is not necessarily wrong, but not as good as it could be. That's what...
Or effective at what they thought they were doing.
Exactly. So they said, well, what are we supposed to do? And I said, well, you should invest for the same reason that I invest. And I invest to maximize the amount of money I make given a certain amount of risk that I'm willing to take. If you then want to help out the world, which I support, you skim off 2% or 1% of the money you make every year and donate it to a charity. And of course, someone says, well, I don't want to give up 1% of the money I make every year. And I said, you already are.
Yeah.
You are giving up 1 or 2% because you're not investing efficiently. You're giving up that money today and you're getting no benefit from it. So
that makes a lot more sense.
But yeah, if you have a reasonable portfolio, say $100,000 or $1 million, you're really lucky. But pick a middle number, 300,000. You take off 1%, $3,000 every year. You find a local charity in your area, and you say, "I want to give you $3,000." Wow, you can make a difference to their budget. Let's say it's a women's shelter. They can buy blankets and food and shoes for women that come in there from an abused husband. And you could really make a difference immediately.
And you have a tax write-off.
You have a tax write-off. You make an immediate difference. And they'll probably let you come in and see the facility and tour it. You can talk to the manager or the director, whoever he or she is, and you can be involved and you can make a real difference. And you know exactly where the money's going. And if you find out they're no longer doing what you want, you give the money to somebody else. So you have control and you have impact and you can change the world in your town very, very significantly with small amounts of money.
Compared to your portfolio.
Yeah, compared to your portfolio.
That'd be like $30 a year for me.
Yeah, so I mean, everything has downsides and it is much easier to change the world if you have money.
And it takes money to make money. I've been investing in mutual funds and RRSPs and yada yada since in my 20s, and it looks like I have done nothing, but it's definitely more than what I started with. So,
well, and I don't know how much, in Canada, when you invest, do you invest in only Canadian companies or do you generally invest in the American stock market? My guy changes mine around every year depending on what's going on, and you have overseas, you have American, I have very few Canadian.
Yeah, there's a actual limit on the amount of foreign investment you can do in your RRSPs, for instance, which is similar to the 410K. But in Canada, it's a complete tax write-off until you actually take it out. Up to a certain limit that's determined by your previous income. So,
and do you have kind of indexes that you can invest in there?
Oh, sure, yeah. There's the Toronto Stock Exchange index funds. There's actual stocks, TSX index stocks that you can buy. So you don't even have to go through a mutual fund. You can just buy these stocks on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and there's no MER. You're
throwing out a lot of TLAs that I have no idea what they are.
Oh,
but that's okay.
MER, basically that's the percentage the mutual fund takes for managing the fund. So it's called. Excellent. I guess that's interesting that the jargon is different up here.
It is very different because I don't know what they are, but in the United States, as an example, our big index is the S&P 500. And it just so happened, calendar year ending 12/31 of 2016, it made 11.96%. And I recently had one of the people who listen to my podcast contacted me, and he said, "Did you say that the market made 11.96?" I said, "Well, the S&P 500, which is a big chunk of the U.S. market, but it's not the total market, but it's a reasonable measure, plus or minus you should have made around there." And he says, "I made 2%." for the entire calendar year of 2016. I'm like, oh, how in the fuck is that possible? Because bonds, real estate, international, everything made money. And I found a website a year ago. One of my listeners pointed it out to me. It's called OpenFolio. And I think it's a US-based thing, but there's 70,000 people that have signed up with OpenFolio, and they link it to all of their trading accounts so you can see performance of the mass of 70,000 people. And the funny thing is, for 2016, collectively, these 70,000 people made 5% when the market went up 12.
Wow.
And they had a headline boasting that 77% of people made money. And I'm like, wait a fucking second. You're telling me 1 out of 4 people fucking lost money when the market was up 12%? How in the hell is that possible? But it's very tricky to buy and sell stocks and do it well. So that's why one of the basic investment philosophies, this is not anything I came up with for sure, buy and hold. You don't want to jump in and out. And in the United States, and I'm sure in Canada, if you're in a taxable account, you can create tax consequences for yourself year after year after year. It's very expensive.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not so bad up here.
That's what I keep hearing.
It's you can invest. It comes directly off your taxes. So you have a percentage of your salary that can go into what we call an RRSP, which is a registered retirement savings plan, and that money is completely. It's a write-off, and right up to the maximum. It's 17% federal tax and whatever the provincial tax is, until you take that money out. And
then
it's a wonderful idea. There's also there's also saving plans for the TFSA, the tax-free savings account, which
and you can have more than one.
You can something like $5,000 a year that you can put money in, but it's you still pay money. You still pay tax on the money that you put into it, but it's interest-free, or it's non-taxable while it accrues interest.
Very nice. I mean,
yeah,
we have some similar things in the States. We have the big thing for employers is a 401k or a 403b.
401k, that's one.
And of course, you can have a IRA or a Roth IRA.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. I think the tax situation is not quite the same. So you're locked in on these things, but it works. It works pretty well.
Well, and that's one of the things that's a problem. I mean, if someone is listening to the show and they're in the United States and they want to contact me, I'll just throw it out here. It's phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. But unfortunately, I get a lot of people contacting me from Canada is the most frequent place outside of the United States. The country behind that, amazingly, is the UAE, United Arab Emirates.
Oh, of course.
I'm big. I'm huge. I'm like Spinal Tap in Japan in the UAE. But
wow.
I am not licensed in these other countries. And a lot of these countries, and I know Canada is one of them because I actually inquired and talked to delightful people in Canada, but they take it very seriously. So I cannot help people in these other countries. I had a client once call me from China and said, can I hire you in China? And I said, I can't even really talk to you unless you've got a 7-digit account. And he said, I do.
Oh, well.
And I said, well, okay. And I hired a law firm that specializes in helping advisors register and follow all the laws in the United States. And they happen to have a branch of their organization in China. And they came back to me and they said, it's not a problem for you in China because you can't break any of the laws because they don't have any.
I was just going to say they don't have any.
So
QA is not a big
in
thing.
the sphere of investment advisor, there are no laws in China. I can't break them. So if anyone happens to have a 7-digit account and lives in China listening to the show, please contact me.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, the rules are all different. And, a lot of times it's just keeping it simple, saving a lot of money. One of the things a lot of people hear throughout their lifetimes is save 10%. On my show,
No.
I call 10% the suck-ass minimum. 10% is not going to work unless you start when you're 22.
Yeah, which
And
is what
most
I did.
people-
So I put way less. Like that's my maximum.
Right. And so what I tell most people, you're going to need to think about 20%.
Yeah, especially if you're in your 40s.
Right. And it's really hard. And if you save 10%, it'll take you 40 years to save and invest and return and grow enough to be able to live on it. If you save 20%, you can do it in under 30 years. Now, I don't know what the social safety net of Canada is. Is there some kind of income that you make in retirement from the government?
A pension, we have a pension, but it's very low. If you rely on that only, you will be working a part-time job at least.
Well, and it's good, better than zero. And the United States, of course, has Social Security. But if it's something greater than zero, it can cut down the number of years you might have to save. So even if you start in your 40s, if you're going to get half or a quarter of your pay, it might not take you 30 years to save up. It might only take you 20 or 25. So starting in your 40s is not necessarily bad if you can save 20%. And that becomes very difficult. And again, it's one of those things where I say to people, I struggle to follow my own advice because I know the math, but you get faced with choices. And sometimes you want to enjoy the money because you may not make it to retirement, but you never know.
Exactly. You might get hit by a bus.
Right.
But still, if you're 80 years old and you have to work a part-time job to eat cat food, well, that's what they did in our school when I was quite young, and it made me quite aware. Is they showed us this pyramid, and they showed us how we don't have a population growth to support my generation in particular. So that kind of scared me.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because what's really weird, I started learning about investments a long time ago, in high school and college. And the driving factor for me wasn't like what it is for a lot of people in the financial services industry. A lot of people get into this field or this career or this job because they want to become rich. Now, I'm not opposed to it philosophically. I'm all for it, right?
I have delusions of richness.
Yeah, but that wasn't what drove me. What drove me is I was terrified out of my fucking mind of being poor. Mm-hmm. What happens when you're 70 or 75 or 80 and you need to buy something and you have no money?
Yeah. And you can't get around because you can't drive and my gosh.
So the fear of being poor, and I think that came mostly from my dad because he was born in 1930, and as a child we would hear stories where him and his siblings would walk along railroad tracks and pick blackberries and blueberries and sell them to people in their town so they could have money to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah. Well, I grew up poor, and then hearing that I might be starving as an old person kind of freaked me out.
Yep. It freaks me out still to this day. And the incidental thing is that by studying this and learning this, and it turns out having the knowledge of how to invest is a valuable skill, and people pay me to help them, I may actually end up becoming wealthy. But that wasn't my driving goal. My driving goal was to figure out how to not be poor. Yeah.
And I'm just working on the how not to be poor. And if you get rich doing that for people, it's worth it. I'm grateful enough as it is to know that I won't be out on the street when I'm 60 even. So
well, and it's a lot about balance. I had someone a couple of years ago contact me and they said, Phil, I've managed to save up $500,000. Can I retire?
No.
Well, and that's kind of my response to most people. That's probably not going to be enough. At least it's not going to be the lifestyle that you are probably used to. A general rule of thumb is you can take out about 5% of your portfolio every year and always have money. So that'd be $25,000. And the person responded, well, I live on $2,000 a month.
Yeah, but
and still. Then my next response to that, which is very common for me to say something like this, and my son is always amazed how I talk to people. I said, that's bullshit. I don't believe you. And they proved it to me. I had to admit they were right. They live on $2,000 a month. I don't know how one does that. Because
it's hard.
I don't, and I don't want to again. I mean, I did in the past. But This is also someone that served in the U.S. military and retired, so they have health insurance for life.
Okay, good. That helps.
Big deal.
I'd have to pay Blue Cross.
Yeah, and this happens to be a person that's 55, and so when they hit 62, they're going to make $20,000 a year from Social Security. And it also happens to be someone in the United States. I don't know if this word translates. They're a registered nurse.
Yeah.
And so as long as they keep their accreditation up, at any time they could get a job making $70,000 a year. They just don't want to work anymore.
Yeah, it's hard
And
work.
so I said, yeah, for you in this bizarre situation with $500,000, you may retire. You have my blessing. Not that they need it, but they want to know someone else said it's okay, and they're doing it great.
Well, owning your own house helps a lot too.
Yeah, that's an investment.
It does. Now, I don't know what are interest rates for homes in home loans in Canada right now.
2 to 3% right now for what I locked in as.
So the same rules would apply to Canadian listeners as the United States-based listeners. In this current situation, do not prepay a penny on your home loan. You want to drag that bitch out as long as you can. Because here's the deal. Because people will tell me, but Phil, I'm going to pay a lot of money in interest over 30 years. Yes, you are. Now the question is, can you do something better with that money? If you invest that in the U.S. stock market, and I don't know exactly how this will play out in Canada, but I imagine to be some kind of similar results. Mm-hmm. If you can make 10% a year, but borrow the money for 3 or 4%, you're making an awful lot of money.
Yep.
And that's the spread. Now, people who are a little older and remember back in the 70s and early 80s where home loans were 10, 12, 14, 15%.
Sometimes even closer to 20.
Yeah, you put every freaking dime you can get on that loan because you're borrowing money at an incredibly high rate. But if you can borrow it at 4 or 5%, and in the United States we get a tax discount on the interest that you pay on a home loan, why pay off a loan that you're effectively borrowing at 3% when you can invest the money at 10?
Yeah. Not most people wouldn't even consider that.
Well, it's a weird thing. And the other thing that I do, and again, it probably doesn't apply to Canada because you probably actually have funds available to help students go to college. But in the United States, it's a big ordeal that people, when they have a 1 or 2 or a 5-year-old, they start freaking out and they want to start saving for college because it's going to take 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I tell parents, do not save for college. Oh. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And I don't know if it will directly apply to most of your listeners, but
we have RRSPs
here, I was going to mention that. It's a registered education saving plan.
Yeah,
so the government kicks in.
It's like an RRSP, but
so if they're kicking in money, that could change the whole calculation. But in the United States, these plans that are called 529s, they often have slightly lower performance, so the results aren't as good. They have higher fees, and of course, when you get closer to your target of when you're going to spend the money, you should start investing more and more conservatively. So if your child is going to college in 3 years, you don't want it all in the emerging markets. You want it in a lot of bonds because you're going to need the money in 3 years. You don't want to lose 25%. So your returns are smaller. So you have higher costs, higher expenses, underperformance, and then basically lower returns because you're investing very conservatively. And in the United States, there is absolutely nothing preventing the individual college or university that you're going to from considering the money that's in your child's name as being available to college. So you might actually hurt your students' ability to get aid, grants, scholarships, tuition waivers, employment opportunities, and all those things. So you thought you were doing the right thing.
Here it's pretty much assumed that it's a little different. And with the RESPs, is it $400 a year, Randy, that the government will kick in?
Don't ask me. I don't have any kids. So.
It used to be up to $400 a year. I don't know if that's changed now.
But yeah, there's a lot of different ways and different things that can be used.
But yeah, that 529 sounds like a bad deal.
Well, it's not horrible, but then you have the other possibility. Like both of my kids, who are very smart, have done alternate education and not gone to university. And so if I had put that money in there and they don't go, when I take it out, not only do I have to pay a 10% penalty, but I have to pay all the tax on it.
Yeah, and that was a funny thing when I invested, when my first son's dad died, I went to put the money in that he got into a basically, I forget what it was called, but I didn't want to do an RESP, and it was a trust fund type thing. It was kind of, and it was still RSPs and all that. So I forget most of what that is now. But that's what I did alternatively, because he wasn't that great in school. And yeah, he ended up using the money on something else. So.
Well, one of the other things I want to mention to your listeners about the Phil Ferguson show, I don't think I even mentioned it myself, but
you're not pushing yourself enough.
That's all right. It's 1/3 finance and 2/3 atheism. So if you have secular listeners, free thinkers, atheist agnostics, in the last few months, for example, I had Dan Errol on, who writes a blog, Danthropology, it's called, and he is one of the preeminent experts on the Ark Park Adventure Park we have in Kentucky down here.
Oh yeah,
I got
banned by Ken Ham
on
Twitter.
I had on
Twitter this week.
David Silverman, the president
we've
of
had
American
him a few
Atheists.
Yeah.
Aaron Ra came and talked about his book.
Cool. Yeah.
That's cool.
I had on an atheist rock band called Monsters on Sunday. And I'll even have people that aren't related to atheism, so it's not just the same old, because sometimes I get bored with that myself. I had on a guy named Ray Smock, who used to be the official historian for the United States House of Representatives for almost 15 years. And so he knows everything about the United States House and Senate and the Constitution. We talked about that. And then recently I had on Ryan Cragen, and we talked about how to end religion in 10 easy steps.
Oh,
I wish it was easy.
Well, it is actually very clever, and it matched up with a lot of things that I've said before. Like one of them, and this is a bit of a problem in the United States, there are a lot of people pushing for more and more private schools.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. And so with the private
and if
school,
you look at Trump's freaking cabinet.
I try not to.
Yeah.
It's very, very upsetting.
Hey, I voted for Hillary. What can I say?
and matter of fact, hopefully in the next week or two, I'm going to have on an author called Peter Conti Brown, and he wrote a book about the Federal Reserve and the American banking system and how that works. Not necessarily pro or con, but just an entire book about this is where it came from, this is how it was created, this is how it works, so that you can be an informed consumer, or at least an informed citizen of the country of the United States. And I'm sure Canada has its own similar kind of thing. But so sometimes I have authors that do something different that kind of keep the show.
Hamilton will figure
variety.
Big in that, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's an important thing, and apparently there was a few secret meetings of millionaires back in the day, 200 years ago, where they met and saved the country from financial collapse, and they said we have to have some way to protect the economy, and the Federal Reserve is part of that system.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of a different regulatory body. In Canada, it's kind of strange. The large banks actually borrow from the federal bank, the Bank of Canada, and that's the money, that's their source of funds. And it's a heavily regulated industry. For instance, we were not exposed in Canada to the housing bubble that happened a few years ago. And so there's something to be said for regulation. I know a lot of people don't like regulation, but
only people who are ill-informed, I think.
Yeah, it worked.
Well, and of course, regulation can go too far. But
yes, of course.
A lot of times, I think when things go wrong, it's because there wasn't proper regulation. I don't know if it's always enough, but did you guys watch the movie The Big Short?
No.
If you want to see a movie / documentary about what caused and what happened in the American housing bubble, that is the movie to do it. And it's not, you're not going to sit there for 90 minutes and think this is a documentary. You don't even realize it's a documentary. It is so entertaining, so well done. And if you're familiar with the phrase, they break the fourth wall.
No.
where a couple of
Blink.
times the characters will stop and talk and look right at the camera and just talk to you as the viewer.
Nice.
Oh,
Okay.
very
And so-
House of Cards-ish.
Yeah, and they'll have times where they have sports stars and TV stars and famous models explaining bits of the economics about it. So it's not just some professor who might be a little boring, but it's fun and entertaining, and it's a very
Educational.
well done show. Yes, very educational.
There's another skeptical investors type person, and they had a video about that bubble, that housing bubble, that explained how it happened and what legalities could have prevented it and such. And it was really interesting.
Yeah, it's
So-
amazing. We have a system here called Jenny May, where the United States
Yeah.
government has created a semi-governmental agency that buys up all the home loans. And so banks can go out and issue as many home loans as they want, and then they get
Crazy.
$350 or $500, and they just turn around and they sell the loan to Jenny May. And so they don't have any risk, so they want to loan to anybody and everybody, because as long as they meet the criteria, they can't lose.
And then
And
housing prices actually went down, and oh my
they-
God.
And it's
Because
funny
they were pushing it up too high. They
Yeah.
Oh,
Where I
and then-
live in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, the housing prices never got really hot. And so when the housing bubble in 2008 burst, house prices here might have gone down 3, 5, 8%.
rather
Oh, that's
than-
really good,
But-
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it's annoying. But in some places like Las Vegas or San Francisco or Florida
It's
or New
horrible.
York, where
Yeah.
people lose 20, 30, 40, 50% of their
Phoenix.
house.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their mortgages become far bigger than the house is worth.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so you get people who are upside down. And there was also a tradition in the United States where if your house goes up, you buy a $300,000 house and the price goes up 10%. Now it's worth 330, and then it goes up 10%. It's worth 360. Americans have this bad habit of refinancing the house, and the bank will give them the $60,000 in extra equity the house is now worth. Wink, wink.
They can do
nudge,
that
nudge.
here too. They can do that here too.
Yeah, and so
It's
people
not
would
a
go out
good
and,
idea.
and buy giant cars and speedboats and all this
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so you do that 4 or 5 times over a decade, and the house that you bought for 300 is now worth 600,000, and you
Well,
owe 600,000.
Yeah.
But when the value of the house falls back to 300,000,
That-
you look at that and you say, "I owe $600,000 on a house that's worth $300,000," and people would literally leave the keys on the counter and walk out of the house.
Oh,
Because
amazing.
would you want to pay $600,000
No,
for
absolutely
something
not.
that was worth 300?
Yeah.
Of course you wouldn't. So, yeah, there was a lot of factors that played into that, and of course the collateralization of parts and pieces of home loans and leveraging and all this stuff that should have been regulated far more wasn't in place. And I don't know that we really fixed it either.
No, and wasn't it the Bush era that took away some, I guess, roadblocks to that happening? That
The unfortunate thing is over the last 30 to 40 years, Republicans and Democrats in the United States have continuously done things to encourage more people to buy houses, even if they can't afford them. And they've also encouraged a greater and greater reduction of what we call the it's the Glasgow Stevens Act is a big act in the United States that it basically made banks really, really boring. A bank is where you put your money in, you have a checking account and a savings account. And then there's brokerage firms, which might
Yeah.
wheel and deal and launch companies. And then you have insurance companies. They all had to be separate and they couldn't mingle. But as they took down more and more of these barriers, you get
Yep.
really, really, really big banks that aren't just your mom and pop local bank. They're nationwide, and they invest in companies, and they do creative things which could make a lot of money or lose a lot of money. And if they fail with the money that all of the people put in the bank to be safe. So I think they need to put those rules back in place, and no bank in the United States, foreign or domestic, should have more than 4% of all deposits for the country in their bank. Right now,
Yeah.
our 5 biggest banks are almost 50%.
Well, when they have that incentive to put money elsewhere. They give these people all these houses and think they're always going to be worth more, and then waste that money elsewhere on these crazy investments. It's just not, well, we saw what happened.
Yeah.
And I just recently instituted a new thing on my show, again, the Phil Ferguson Show. I now have an extra mic hooked up to the soundboard, and it's always on, and that microphone is for Jesus.
If he shows up.
We're waiting.
So if me or any of my guests ever get anything wrong about Christianity, and since he's everywhere, he can jump in at any time and correct us. And so far, we've gotten everything exactly right.
Okay, so we got to actually.
Does Allah ever drop by and use the mic?
That's right.
Well, we got to pay the bills here, so we are going to go to our new sponsor here, and here we go. Our commercial break.
Okay.
What's wrong, Sally?
The other kids at school are being dicks.
Why, Sally?
They said my chorizo burrito was appropriated from Hispanic culture.
What a right bunch of little cunts they are. Well, Sally, I guess it's back to PB&J sandwiches for you.
Wait, Sally! Before you contemplate suicide, look what the experts at the Food and Culture Institute can do for you! That burrito, Sally? Well, that's just a spicy sausage and flatbread wrap.
That's great for Sally, but what about us adults?
That chicken curry? That's nothing more than poultry in a savory sauce. Those Shanghai noodles? Repurposed to vegetables on string pasta.
But isn't pasta from Italy, which has its own distinct culture? Ow!
Shut up, Sally. When accusations of cultural appropriation rear their ugly heads, remember the good people at the Food and Culture Institute. God bless those heroes!
Phil, are you still there? Because if you are, please tell us any.
I could just talk.
Repeat
yeah.
Well, give yourself a plug. Give whatever you need to do.
The
to plug.
podcast is the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. I'm such a naming savant, I could not even come up with that name for my show. But it freed me up. I was so freaked out about what do you pick a title for, because you're kind of stuck with your title, and you've got to, if it says your title is Politics Today and you talk about economics, people, the internet is vicious. They just go, that's not your title. So it's the Phil Ferguson Show, and I cover whatever the fuck I want. It's generally 1/3 finance, 2/3 atheism. It's positive atheism. I want to lift all boats, so I have people on to promote what they do every single week. Authors, poets, bloggers, video people, YouTubers, and then, of course, the finance stuff. But sometimes we do different things. They can find it on all major podcast platforms, but it's hosted at Spreaker. They can also find the Phil Ferguson Show Facebook page. They can follow me on Twitter at Skeptic Money, and they can email me phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And I definitely want to thank all of you for having me on your show. I can't even believe how fast an hour went by.
No kidding.
No, we didn't.
We didn't get to some of the topics I wanted to get to.
I know.
Technical
atheism,
analysis.
really.
Well, atheism and technical analysis. I love technical analysis.
Technical analysis, just don't do it. Yeah, there's the short for you.
It's voodoo. I mean, you might as well sit there with a voodoo doll, right?
Maybe we can get back
bones.
and chat about it some other time. But thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you for
Phil.
being on, Phil.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Are we still on YouTube?